Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Today on eNCA for Channel 403. Let's take you back to that very important conversation we were having with the Minister. Minister, welcome back. Now, we were really just touching on the outcomes, particularly now of this summit. Can you just talk us through those?
Yes, as I was saying that today we're talking about sustaining and supporting peace and security initiatives on the African continent, and particularly Japan providing support to the structures that have been established by the AU to enhance its ability to provide peace and security in context where there's a conflict. This was something that was agreed to today, but we also had extensive discussion about addressing the root causes of instances of conflict and instability on the continent. So we referred to matters of good governance, the need to ensure that young people have real opportunities. So a lot of agreement on a strong skills development investment, and the establishment of a fund that would be a dedicated Japan and Africa conjoint fund for support to youth startups on the continent. So I think this is one of the more important conclusions. A third one is to advance agricultural development. Japan was able to refer to some instances of agricultural initiatives that they have invested in various African countries, where countries have become very productive in producing rice and other food products and have been able to become exporters of food, and so enhance food security and job creation and earning of livelihoods by rural communities in a number of African countries. And the agreement was we'd want to see a spreading and an increase in that form of investment. We also referred to the strength of Japan in science and innovation. We'd like to see Africa becoming an innovative continent where young people enjoy opportunity to study science and technology at the highest levels. We said we'd want to draw on the experience of Japan as a very digital nation, highly digitized, very innovative, science playing a key role in solving social problems in Japan. Mm-hmm. So all of this is part of a package which Japan has agreed to provide $30 billion US dollars toward. And we're very excited at that commitment.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, very, very impressive pledge there. But I just want to take you back, Minister. You spoke about the deliberations around the root cause of conflict on the continent, because it really does, to a certain extent, stifle that growth or development. So a very important conversation that clearly was had then, I'm sure very robust. What were some of the sentiment around the root causes of conflict on the continent?
Well, it was interesting. The conversation was begun by the co-chair, who is the president of Tunisia, President Kais Saied. He began with a very interesting analysis of the continent, and saying that we have failed to embrace diversity and make diversity a positive dividend for the continent. He also said, due to failures of governance, corruption, and poor attention to public service, you've had instances where the people are disaffected with governments, and that we are unable to build a culture in our various countries in which there's a shared notion about the values of our societies and the priorities that we wish to adopt and act on as society and government. Also, the inability to respond to the concerns and interests of young people who are the future shapers of our society. So he gave quite a frank, unusual, I thought, for a head of state, analysis of what the root causes of the lack of peace and stability are on the continent, and urged each of us to be frank in our contributions in really identifying what we see as the root causes and what we would propose as some of the ways to respond to those challenges. The debate then ensued. I think broadly there was agreement with what he had said, but also concerns about terrorism, extremism, which many other countries are experiencing. And, they're worried that actually these don't come from internal troubles, but are sometimes imposed by external forces, and the whole notion of external interference of the African continent enjoyed a great deal of attention. But in the end, we seemed to agree that we have to become the mistresses and masters of our own fate. We must take control both of our resources, of innovation and value addition on the continent, and really move away from practices that have built dependency and caused us to be subject to the whims of others.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of external influences, I know you're quite passionate about this and have been a minister that has been very frank on your position on this matter. It's the matter around the countering malign Russian activities in Africa bill. You've been very vocal on this matter, suggesting that it's perhaps legislation that seeks to blackmail Africans on the continent. Talk us through your views around this and if it was in fact touched on.
Well, we've discussed that in the context of the African Union and have agreed an approach in that context. It wasn't specifically discussed here. We did take a position on it in the SADC summit in the DRC just a week and a half ago. So clearly, in various bodies of Africa, we are concerned about the likely adoption of this legislation. I am continuing, along with other colleagues, with lobby efforts, and will continue to do so. As I indicated in the National Council of Provinces, we'll continue these efforts when we go to the UN General Assembly next month. We've already set up meetings through our embassy, where we'll be meeting with public representatives in the United States to indicate our concern and displeasure about this legislation. I do think it's important to point out that it's only one house that has adopted it, but also that it's a private member's bill. What is worrying, it seemed to have a cross-party support, and that is extremely, worrying for us. I also have planned to speak to activists outside of the formal public institutions in the United States. I think academics, particularly in historically Black institutions who are known friends of South Africa, should be writing on this legislation and whether it is a kind of bill that a so-called major democracy should adopt against countries that may not agree to it. We think it's patently undemocratic and illustrates that bullying that I keep referring to in statements that I make about how some of our friends regard us.
Do you think perhaps the abstention of some of the countries on the continent, insofar as that Russia-Ukraine matter is concerned in the UN, could have prompted this position or the expediting of this type of a bill?
Well, this is what we assume has led to this, which is wrong, because the right to abstain is a democratic right that all nations enjoy. Remember that we are all equal universally in terms of membership of the UN body. So you can't, having had particular procedures in place for many, many decades, suddenly say that, you have displeasure. Everybody has a right to abstain, to vote yes, to vote no. These are all democratic rights and freedoms. So to suddenly produce a piece of legislation that seeks to take away this right or threaten you should you exercise it is, I believe, really ridiculous. It's quite embarrassing, I think, for our colleagues in the United States. to have such a piece of legislation, proposed legislation in place.
And then just lastly, Minister, on the Cuba matter, the 15 million grant matter, the Constitutional Court has since dismissed your application for direct access to appeal that ruling. We understand, though, that you're petitioning the SCA as well. What is the status of that particular matter? Because I know you've been very firm on that one as well, saying AfriForum will not tell you who and whom not to assist when.
Absolutely. At the utilization of the funds that are allocated toward what is called the African Renaissance Fund is a decision that is made in terms of an act which established the African Renaissance Fund. And this means there's an executive statutory power granted, and that we should exercise it in terms of the law. Now, the Constitutional Court said doesn't think it should hear the case, and there are three important words: at this stage. So, the celebration that followed the published announcement was rather amusing, because clearly people don't read the entire statement of the Constitutional Court, because it says at this stage. It doesn't say forever and all time. And it says the matters can be pursued through the High Court and the Supreme Court, and we have submitted already and are waiting for the SCA. And I believe they should hear this matter. It is important because it speaks to constitutional powers, essentially, and the executive's constitutional power. Plus, it is not a financial donation. It is or was intended to provide humanitarian aid to Cuba at their request at a very difficult time for their country. So, it's goods to that value, no money. We've never, ever, through the African Renaissance Fund, given money to any recipient of our assistance.
Minister Pandor, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That's International Relations and Cooperation Minister Naledi Pandor. She speaks to us from Tunisia this afternoon.